Good day to all newcomers and already ardent fans of the Mew Online universe. The Bless Universe project is in touch. One of the most experienced, popular and stable projects of the Mew Online universe, you already know. We continue our series of guides on all classes of our season and have already managed to analyze 4 out of 5 classes. If you have not yet seen and had time to watch our videos, I strongly recommend you doing so, especially if you are looking for your favorite class. Today's guide we analyze a special class that is not immediately available but upon reaching level 180 of the basic characters, DL. As usual, we will not be able to go through the classes in great detail. We will leave you at least a little imagination for searching and developing in our game. So do not be embarrassed and add to our guide some comments and help newcomers and old-timers with us. Briefly about the class. DL is one of the special classes in our game, but is also not very similar to anyone else. Probably the closest class to it is BK. He is similar with BK in difficulty of leveling, dependence on items and bonuses of skill damage received from the energy. At the same time, DL is the most unusual class, which is closely connected with his pets, which strengthen him up and are his most faithful companions. DL also has an additional line of characteristics, namely Command, which affects the strength of his pets and his buff. DL is a damage dealing class and copes best in this matter both in PvE and PvP. He is highly dependent on the team and their buffs. Despite the fact that he is a damage dealer, it is difficult to call him a duelist, but in the team battles he reveals himself to the fullest. He has a buff in his arsenal for himself and allies, increasing critical damage. Let's quickly move on to more detailed examination of the character. So, you chose DL, which means you love animals, you have noble blood, you love solitude, but you are overly dependent on the team. In other words, you have bipolar disorder, my friend. Okay, I'm just kidding. Don't be nervous. Pet your horse or something. DL is really overly dependent on both his pets, especially his horse, and his teammates. I think it would be right to get down to business right away and tell you what his pets can do. In addition to himself, the Dark Lord can raise the level of his pets, which are indispensable for him in different stages of the game. The maximum level of his pets is 50. In order for the level to raise steadily, DL is forced to spend a lot of stats in the command characteristics. It will increase both level limit of your companions and their damage, and in case of the Raven, the speed of his attack. Speaking of the Raven, it fills the slot where you usually carry a shield or a second one-handed weapon and will be indispensable companion at the start of the game, helping you destroy monsters around you. You can give him various orders, attack, patrol, and so on, but the simplest command will be to attack monsters around you. Since the initial spells available to you are not mass, it will be very difficult for DL to level up, and our companion, Raven, comes to his aid. But there is another difficulty. Creating Raven is not so easy at the start of the game. You will need a Spirit of Raven and several stones, and all this can easily burn out. As you can understand, this is the similarity between DL and BK and is extremely difficult to level up, and we will constantly come across bots on our way. At the start, the Raven is not so strong, and you will have to patiently level up your pet, replenishing the stats. But as soon as you get the Ancient set, the Raven will also give you plus 20% damage, just like other classes. I think everything is clear about the Raven. Don't you worry, kind sir, there will be many more disadvantages on this character, and we will return to them very soon, but for now, let's talk about the horse. Horse is an integral part of the Dark Lord and his main friend. You will also need to create a horse, finding the spirit of the horse and a few more stones than for Raven. Speaking of the noble deeds, sir, The horse is your big advantage. It gives you an additional ability that pushes away your enemies, increased movement speed, significantly increases the distance of your attacks, saves you from the affliction of microstance from receiving damage, and reduce incoming damage to you, sir. The higher the level of the horse, the more damage to you it reduces and additional protection it gives. The horse can also be improved, but this is a completely different story, my friend. So without a horse, you will be like without hands. You definitely need it. And of course, if you do not want to make pets yourself, you can always buy them in our X shop for cash points. So let's continue discussing the difficulties of playing the Dark Lord. So you will be very short in damage, sir. Also, the chance to dodge attacks and the increase in defense for your character is extremely low, so monsters will hit you with great pleasure, and you will have to stock up on health and potion that replenish it. Without a raven, you are practically defenseless, and with it, all your stats will go only to the damage for the pet and your ability to defend yourself. The cloak that replaces his wings, unlike the analogs, does not give him protection but only additional damage, and you will be heavily dependent on the second level cloak. And this is already a middle and late game, friends. And besides, DL vitally needs the ignore defense rate option. Without it, it will be extremely difficult for you to penetrate your enemies. In general, there are many disadvantages, but don't worry, the late game for him will definitely not disappoint you. So let's talk about stats. DL gets 7 stats per level. Strength and energy are the main characteristics for DL, adding physical damage and additional skill damage like BK. And again, energy gives him not only skill damage but also additional physical damage. 20 energy equals 1% of skill damage. DL has 4 main types of stat distribution: DL crit, DL tank, DL damage, and DL through ancient set. I did not take into account the early PvE stat build, but I will definitely tell you about it. Early game, provided that you already have Raven. You only need strength to carry weapons and armor. The amount of agility will depend on your goals and willingness to not stand AFK. If you are an active player and are ready to buy a lot of health potions and you do not have horse yet, then keep the agility level like 25-30% of the maximum. If not, then you will need more, about 40-50% of the stats, so as not to die so quickly from the monsters. You will need vitality a little more than other classes, from 10% or even more if you want to participate in PvP somehow. You only need energy to work some spells. And we send all other stats to the unique 5th characteristics, Command, to strengthen out our pets and be able to normally raise levels. By the middle game, when you already get a horse, only the increased distribution of stats in Command changes, so that it hits harder. As you can understand, PvP in such build is not very convenient and might say unusual. In the late game, you will have to find the secret scroll of Fire Scream. This is now the main spell for you both attacking and for raising levels. And with the advanced Fire Scream and sufficient number of stats, a new variation of stat distribution appears. Excellent set. So I hope you don't mind, sir. Depending on the number of available stats on the server, strength you will need it to carry items. For top weapons you will need up to 13,000 stats. Agility will need about 13-15,000 for adequate attack speed and defense. Vitality is vital for us to live long as possible, about 15-20k. We distribute energy around the maximum or maximum amount since it affects both physical damage, skill damage, and the strength of our buff on critical damage. Okay guys, sorry. I will continue now. Like MG and SM, in ancient sets, DL will sacrifice a lot of his defense, but gain a lot unlike other classes, since he's heavily dependent on Ignore and unlike other classes, almost always rely on his attack from the hand. You will need strength only to wear items, and in this case of ancient set, you will need significantly less, about 4 or 5k strength, depends on set. Agility also requires adequate amount, about 13-15k. Vitality we will need more to compensate for lack of protection with the amount of health, about 19-20,000. Energy still requires a maximum or pre-maximum amount. And command, only for skills. You can experiment with stats in different ways. For example, if you have an Imperial Dark Master set, Ignore on your top cloak, and Elite Horse. With all this, you will have about 22% Ignore. You can distribute strength for items, agility about 15-17,000, vitality about 23-25,000, energy about 27-29,000, and command only for skills. This distribution will allow you to live much longer, but even more hoping for Ignore option to work in order to break through your opponents in battle. Tank DL. Tank DL is necessary for PvP events such as castles, where the Dark Lord will act as a battle master, giving stuns, pushing opponents away from the crown, and his main task will be to survive as long as possible. Strength is for the items. Energy is for all skills. We try to distribute vitality and agility to the maximum amount. Command is only for skills. Rarely you will need a tank DL outside of PvP battles. Crit Summon DL. Such stats make DL a support character who gives an enhanced buff to the critical damage and acts as a summoner of groups using his skill Summon in the same castle siege. Strength is for items, agility 13-15k, vitality 19-20,000 to somehow live, energy only for skills to work, and the maximum amount of command stat, since its effect crit buff 3 times more than energy. Such DL is often required in the group with damage dealers to strengthen them up even more. Let's move on to the necessary items now. As I already mentioned, using ancient sets, DL, like other classes, sacrifice his defense by acquiring such a cherished Ignore for him. We will list similar sets. Darkside Adamantine is the most optimal and frequently used set, giving 8% double damage and 4% Ignore. And Imperial Dark Master set is a top and extremely rare set that changes everything for DL. 5% double damage, but as much as 15% Ignore. It's a lot, for those who don't know. There are others similar to Adamantine, and you can read about them in the link in the description, but these ones are listed are most popular used. The problem is, as always, catastrophic complexity of assembly this set, high cost and complexity of sharpening, but all this is worth it, believe me. Please. For excellent sets, the priority will be as follows: damage decrease. As for many, it will be a basic option to survive longer, be able to boldly attack and take a hit. Max HP will also allow us to live longer, not die from one combo, and stand at the forefront. Reflect damage will be a good addition to your set and your damage, because as I already said, you will have to be in the forefront of the battles. Any other option will be good, just to increase your set bonus. Let's look at two variations of the DL combo. Fire Blast, Electric Spike, Fire Burst. When pressed correctly, we will see and hear a clap that deals double damage to the enemy, ignoring his armor. And the second variant of the combo through the Horse ability, Fire Blast, Earth Shake, and Fire Burst. Earthshake has an animation of use that you may have problems with at first, but if you use Earthshake and Fire Blast quickly enough, then this animation can be cancelled without leaving yourself in place. And now, conclusions! Biel has a very weak early game, very dependent on all of his items, extremely in need of ignore option to pierce his enemies. Too weak without his pets, dependent on the team, but at the same time very strong in the late game with good items and strong team. Gets strong bonuses from his leveled up pets, puts a lot of pressure on the enemies with his colossal damage, has a high increase in attack speed, quite strong in battles, and at the same time has a high attack range as an elf. Friends, thank you for watching to the very end and being patient to my bad accents. You are the best for sure. If we were able to help you somehow, we will be glad to see your like, subscription, and be sure to supplement the guide in the comments to help both beginners and old-timers in mastering the character. We really appreciate you and waiting for you in the Mew Bless